So we talked to UCLA last night, and we are an equal rival opportunity provider here on Mark Rogers TV. So we switch it over to the USC Trojans with a pivotal Pac-12 South Division game against Utah coming up on Saturday night. We bring in Evan Budrovih of Conquest Chronicles to break down the Trojans and the Utes. Hey, Evan, how are you?
Doing well, Mark. It's been a crazy season, but they still have their chances, right?
It really has been, and I just checked out the game log just to make sure I'm all set on the standings, and they sit atop the South Division at 4-1, 5-2 overall. So there have been some bumps in the road, most notably unexpected loss out at Boston College in particular, but the Arizona State game kind of salvaged the season at least through 7 games at this point. So as we look at this season as a whole, now let's break it down individually. Some of those players that possibly have surprised you from a positive aspect or maybe have disappointed through 7 games.
Sure. Let's start with the disappointment just because of when USC, if you're not winning every game, there's disappointment there, of course. I would say the tight end position. You look at 2 guys in particular, Randall Telfair and Bryce Dixon. One's a senior, one's a freshman, so there's a variety there. But Dixon's a very talented kid who has had opportunities and has done well, but he's dropped a couple of big passes. And then that'll take time, obviously, as you grow up and develop. But I think Bryce has 2 or 3 touchdowns this year, so when he makes big plays, he's been valuable. But the issue is when you're not getting production from that position, and last season, as we saw, Washington did so much with Austin Seferian-Jenkins, and he was really a dominant player. The offense has struggled because they don't have that same threat from this group of tight ends, which will come over time, but they just don't have it at this point. So I think that's a position where USC would have liked to have more from that coming into the year. They just haven't gotten it because one kid, Jalen Cope Fitzpatrick, was academically ineligible, and things of that nature have really limited them in that position, so they haven't gotten the same production. I would say on the other end, though, the linebacking core, so the guys that are covering the run, dropping into their zones, they've done a great job, and that starts with Hayes Pullard, of course, the perennial All-Pac-12 player who's a fifth-year senior. He's been around forever. He knows the program, and he's done a great job. And Anthony Serrao, kind of his will linebacker on that opposite side, he's a very intelligent player as well. I was just reading up this week. He had offers to Stanford. He had offers to Princeton to play football. And, obviously he chose USC, but very smart kid out there, and he plays like it. Some young guys who've stepped up is Sua Cravens. We saw him as an All-American safety last year. He's kind of slid down more to linebacker a little bit against these more read option and the spread teams, and he's done a good job. And that's the one thing with Sua. He's a great athlete. I think he has 9 tackles for loss already, so even through 7 games, he's making a huge impact. And just that position in general where scholarships are an issue, but that's the position where the dependability has really been key for SC.
Again, Evan, we're looking at a team that's in prime position to win the South Division, 3 critical games after Utah in the Pac-12. Talk about this team's ability or maybe inability to finish off football games, play a full 60 minutes, and show it both offensively, defensively, and in special teams all at once.
Well, I think we saw it in that 2-week stretch, the Arizona State and then the Arizona game. So USC has a comfortable lead against ASU. I think it was 9 points with about 3-4 minutes to go. And you're thinking, okay, well, USC's running the ball well, Buck Allen's playing well. It should be wrapped up with a backup quarterback. Well, ASU goes right down the field and scores within 20 seconds, and then they get the ball back again, and they score on a Hail Mary to end the game. So just that alone is disappointing if you're USC. But more importantly, just the way ASU came back, I think was impressive on their part. And then you go to the Arizona game, where once again USC had outplayed the Wildcats, who was number 10 coming into that one, playing much better football. They were running again, they were throwing, and they looked like a complete team. But as it would have it, the last 5 minutes, and this is an issue that is going to affect this team all year because they don't have a lot of guys who are taking reps out there. I think Leonard Williams had 90 plays against Arizona, so he was tired in that game, and so were some other guys. But when you're not at full strength, that fourth quarter is tough to play. So Arizona started scoring some touchdowns, and they had a kick to win it, but they missed it. So USC kind of avoided a last-second loss there. So it's kind of interesting how it goes back and forth in the matter of a week. And then you look at the Colorado game where USC, the score says great, 56-28, but the second half defense, which granted had some backups, but it was not up to the par that you would expect against a team that was so dominant in the first half. And that's going to come with fatigue and things of that nature. But as you look at the schedule, Mark, it's ridiculous coming down the stretch. So they cannot afford to slip up in these fourth quarters.
That said, against Arizona State, for a guy like me that's searching around the country for good games and trying to lock into the best fourth quarters, that's made for some good football viewing from me, catching that Arizona State finale, and I pretty much caught Arizona in the second half. And again, it was a pretty comfortable lead, and it was right there for the taking for Arizona in trying to convert that onside kick and try to get a second chance there. So very exciting for USC fans. Maybe not what they would like to see, but again, in prime position in the Pac-12. Go into a pivotal game against Utah. The Utes overachieving right now at 5-1, 2-1 in the Pac-12. They've been a very strong football team. Beat UCLA, probably the marquee win of the season for the Utes. So your thoughts about USC going on the road? A lot of noise. They've got a history with Utah, even preceding the Pac-12 with 12 games in this series coming in. So your thoughts about the Utes?
Well, yeah, I'd just say, first of all, as you mentioned, 12 games. USC's won the 3 times they've played in the Pac-12, but they've been physical games. They've been tough. Even the ones where USC dominated, like just last year, Travis Wilson gets hurt. They didn't have Thompson at the time, the backup, so their offense was pretty inept. But outside of that, it's been very competitive games, and USC knows it's going to be a physical, it's going to be a dogfight, and that's a credit to Coach Whittingham. But more to your point, I would say that Utah, it's a tough environment. The muss, as they call them, the home field advantage for them, is intense, and it's a tough place to play. Washington State somehow got a win in Utah, and that just speaks to how crazy this conference really is. But more times than not, Utah is going to come out to play. And I remember last year they beat Stanford. They almost beat UCLA there. So I think USC gets it, that they have to be prepared, and especially with a young offensive line who has like 2 returning starters, but all these kids are freshmen, sophomores, young kids, that you have to be ready. And just to add to it, not to make it sound like an avalanche of mistakes, but USC has a young offensive line, and Utah has a great pass rush, lead the conference in sacks, and they had 10 against UCLA, like you mentioned, to win that game. So it's a combination of things that scares USC. So what they've done in practice is they've actually had these DJs who typically just play music and things to pump the guys up, just blast loud, audible noise. And the idea is, of course, to get the players focused and get the signals out, because USC will do that a lot. They'll look to the sideline, to the boards, and then kind of like the Chip Kelly style, they'll flash the hand signals around, and Kessler will bark some orders out. But obviously it's harder when you got a lot of noise. So you'd expect USC to be prepared for it, but you never really know how loud it's going to get until you get there.
It's not necessarily at the top of the list when people across the nation think about tough environments, because we typically think 100,000 is the standard. But in looking at what happened to Stanford last year, just ask the Cardinal about going to Utah as a heavy favorite in that situation. We're at a point in the season, Evan, where we can finally, I know a lot of people love to do it through 3 or 4 weeks of the season, but we're finally getting to a position right now with about 4 games to play in the Pac-12 where we can start to think about implications of this game and possibly what it could mean for the team that comes out on top on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just looking at, like you said, so these 2 teams are right near the top. I mean, even ASU is not that far behind either. So the winner of that game, you would think, kind of has the advantage, right? So if USC were to beat Utah, they'd have a 5th win. And for Utah, they'd have their 6th win of the season, but another one in Pac-12. So I think what it really comes down to is which one of these teams can win that game and then have the upper hand, because of how crazy that South division that has all the teams except for Colorado ranked. So, I mean, that in itself is impressive. But more importantly, just there's so many good teams in the South that you can't overlook any week. So if USC can get an upset, which I don't know if even if it's an upset. I mean, traditionally it wouldn't be, but just given how well Utah's played. But if USC can get that win, then they put themselves in great position to where they have, the UCLA game coming up. They have to go to Washington State, which the demons of the Cougars always stick in your mind. But, playing those teams, if you get a win now, it gives you a little bit of a buffer for later.
Before we let you go, Evan, let's talk about the college football playoff, because I think this is unfortunate for the Pac-12. This conference does not disappoint me in its play. I think it's disappointed some people because of the play of UCLA and Oregon in one loss, basically possibly ruining their season at the top. But if you look at the parity across the board, this may be the strongest conference in college football. It's amazing the quality of competition. Even looking at USC's remainder of the schedule after Utah, going to Washington State, playing Cal at home, then finishing up with UCLA, this USC team could finish 8-1 in the Pac-12. They could finish 5-4 in the Pac-12. These other teams are that good and that close competitively.
No, certainly, and that's what makes it so exciting for us to watch, and also nerve-wracking at the same time. I mean, just look at it now. You have 5 or 6 teams already bowl eligible. You look at teams that could maybe win 9 or 10 games. The problem is, like you said, there's so many good teams that it's hard to get 9, 10 wins in a season, because you're maybe getting 5 in conference, maybe you're at 8 or 9 overall. So that the parity may hurt at the conference. I do believe, and I think it'd be crazy if this didn't happen, that if Oregon were to win, I think they deserve a spot. I still think if maybe if ASU or USC finished off with a lot of wins, beat the likes of Notre Dame, possibly in that discussion as well. But it's going to be tough for many other teams to have a case for the playoff. I think at least for the championship of the Pac-12, sure, because it's just how wild it's been. But there's certainly at least 2 or 3 teams that have an outside chance of making the playoff.
All right, Evan, would like to check out your work. What are you working on at this point of the week?
Yeah, I mean, this week it's all about getting ready for Utah because Devontae Booker is an outstanding running back. Travis Wilson's a guy who's a local native, so we're trying to do some stuff on him. Mostly for USC fans, I think the idea is how do you get ready for this type of game, and are these players up for the challenge? Are they going to overlook Utah, or are they focused enough to get the job done?
Evan Budrovih, check out his work at Conquest Chronicles on the SB Nation platform. Evan, thank you so much for the information and the insight, as always.
Always appreciate it, Mark. Thank you.